All right, so today for notes, we're going to be going over cell structures. So your heading for your notes should be cell structure, and then you can put in the subheading organelles, or you can just write cell structure. And while you're watching this, you can pause at any point to make sure that you're able to write everything down. It'll be a little different because I'm not writing it on the board, but I'll tell you what you need to write down, okay? So you will either be looking at or have just finished looking at some onion cells. You can see here that we've got a cell here. This middle part is the nucleus. And then you've got your cytoplasm is everything between the nucleus and the cell membrane. And then the dark lines in between that you can see here are the cell walls, because these are plant cells. So remember, plant cells are cells that have walls. They're eukaryotic cells, just like animal cells. But animal cells don't have cell walls. And then the other cells you were looking at were the Elodea cells, which is another plant. You can see here we've got the walls around the sides. The cytoplasm is the space in between. And the little green dots are chloroplasts, which we're going to learn a little bit more about. You've already written down some information for it, but we're getting all of our organelles just in our notes real fast today. And then tomorrow, you'll be getting to look at a cheek cell, which is eukaryotic, but an animal cell. So the other two were plant cells, and this one is an animal cell. And again, you see there's a nucleus, but if you notice, the shape here is not a rectangle like the other ones were, or more rectangular, more regular. This is a little more of a blob-like shape, and it just has a cell membrane and no cell wall. All right, so when we talk about organization, we have our first level of organization, which is molecular. We, at the beginning of the semester, learned about atoms that are joined together to make macromolecules. And then our macromolecules get combined into different shapes to make organelles. And organelles are structures that carry out specific jobs within the cells. So what I want you to write down on this screen is organelles are structures that carry out specific jobs or functions within the cell. So you're going to be writing this whole section here, okay? Oops. Organelles are structures that carry out specific functions within the cell. All right, and then our next level is cellular. One cell has all it needs to carry out all of life's processes, right? Cells are the basic unit of life. It's one of our characteristics of life that we looked at. And here again, we have the same thing. The organelles carry out all of the functions of life. So you have it on your last page, and here, similar idea. Make sure you have that written down in your notes. That's the first thing you need to write down. All right, so all cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic, have a cell membrane, DNA, and cytoplasm. You should have this written down from our first set of notes already. And if you don't, make sure you add it. But if you already have it written down, you don't have to write these down. You did not have written down that ribosomes are in all cells. So I would like you to write down all cells have ribosomes. Ribosomes is this word here. Okay. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. All right, so I'd like you to write eukaryotic cells have nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. So you're writing eukaryotic cells have nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. You're writing what is underlined here. You can pause and finish writing that down as I move on. All right, so the cytoplasm contains all the organelles of the cell. The cytoplasm is like jello that is inside the cell, and it keeps everything kind of in place, that everything just sits in. Our control center is the nucleus, okay? So the nucleus is a very important part of the cell. It's where DNA is. It controls which DNA then controls the cell activities. We're going to learn a lot more about DNA next semester. We're going to have a whole unit talking about DNA and how DNA leads to proteins. And then you have your nuclear membrane. So it's like the part that surrounds the nucleus and has little holes in it that allows molecules to move in and out. and it has at least one nucleolus. And the nucleolus is where ribosomes are made. And ribosomes are very important. We're going to talk more about them in a minute. So on this slide, I would like you to write down the nucleus contains DNA and the nucleolus. All right, so you're writing the nucleus contains DNA and the nucleolus, which is underlined here. All right, so here's a picture that you can see. We've got our nuclear membrane, which is around the outside. It's got the pores or the holes that let molecules in and out. And then you've got your DNA inside, which is all this squiggly stuff. And then your nucleolus is this dark patch here, and that's where ribosomes are made. And here, if you look at a whole animal cell model, in the middle here, this big guy is the nucleus, and this is as if it were cut open so that you can see the nucleolus inside. All right, so our cells have different functions. We have organelles that build and modify and transport proteins, okay? So these are the ones that build, modify, and transport proteins. We have our ribosomes, our endoplasmic reticulum, which we usually shorten to ER because endoplasmic reticulum is a lot of letters to write. And the endoplasmic reticulum modifies and moves proteins, and then our Golgi apparatus, or sometimes called the Golgi complex, packages the proteins up and sends them off wherever they need to go. So on this, I would like you to write organelles that build, modify, and transport proteins, and then you don't need to say what each of these do, but you're going to say ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. So you're just listing those three underneath this first sentence in bold, okay? So organelles that build, modify, and transport proteins is the first thing you're going to write. And then you're going to write ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. All right, first we're going to talk about ribosomes. Underneath that last sentence, you're going to write ribosomes make proteins. So the ribosomes can be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, which makes it the rough endoplasmic reticulum. The ribosomes are like teeny tiny little dots is what they look like when we see them under a microscope. And they, when they're attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, that makes it so it's bumpy and rough. And they also can just be in the cytoplasm, which is why we can have them in prokaryotes, right? Prokaryotes don't have an endoplasmic reticulum, but they still have ribosomes. So they're not membrane bound, so they're both found in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. You should already have this written down. You do not need to write it again. The only thing you needed to write on this slide was ribosomes. Ribosomes make proteins. Okay, so this is a picture of what a ribosome kind of looks like. It's made out of 2 subunits. You don't need to get into major detail with this. We'll learn a little more detail on it next semester when we talk about protein synthesis. So here it's showing the way that RNA works with the ribosomes to make a peptide chain, which is what turns into a protein. But you don't need to worry about all those details right now. And if you look in this picture, these blue dots here are ribosomes, and then also all along this yellow endoplasmic reticulum that has the blue dots, that would be the rough endoplasmic reticulum, because there are ribosomes attached to it. And as far as our progression of how proteins move is we have our nucleus where DNA comes out. Well, DNA doesn't come out, sorry. The DNA sends the mRNA out, and then the mRNA goes to these ribosomes and makes the proteins, and it moves through the endoplasmic reticulum, and then it goes to the Golgi apparatus where it gets packaged up, and then it can either be used in the cell or sent out. And here on the bottom right corner is what the smooth endoplasmic reticulum looks like. It's got more, it looks more like almost like little tubes, but there are no, you'll see there's no ribosomes on it, so it's smooth. And the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is more responsible for making lipids that the cell needs. So lipids are another one of our macromolecules that we learned about in our first unit. Okay. Our next set of organelles that we're going to talk about are organelles that store, clean up, and support. So you're going to write organelles that store, cleanup, and support. And then you're going to list the ones underneath. You don't have to write all the details about them. You're just going to list them. So organelles that store, clean up, and support is what you're writing down in your notes. The first one is the vacuole. And vacuoles store water, salt, proteins, and carbohydrates. We'll talk more about those in a second. Plants have a large central vacuole, okay? And then lysosomes are our other ones. So you're writing down vacuole and lysosomes. So organelles that store, clean up, and support is the first thing you write, and then you write the vacuole, and lysosomes are our two organelles in this category of organelles. And the cytoskeleton can, support, that works. So then you're also writing the cytoskeleton, okay? So vacuole, lysosomes, cytoskeleton. All right, so the vacuole, here we have our large central vacuole in plants cells. So the central vacuole is responsible for storing large amounts of water. It helps give structure to the plant cells, and it makes it so that there's water available to the cell for photosynthesis. Because remember, for photosynthesis, we need to have carbon dioxide and water and sunlight, and those come together to make carbohydrates, and then oxygen is released. So we do need a large place for storing water in plant cells, because we need a lot of water for photosynthesis. All right. We don't go into a lot of details on lysosomes, but lysosomes break things down, okay? And then the cytoskeleton, you had to write it down for your organelle hunt around the room. The cytoskeleton is like almost like little branches that hold up different parts of the cell and connect different organelles. But you don't need to worry too much about those right now. So our next cell function is those that capture and release energy. So you're writing capture and release energy, chloroplasts, and mitochondria. Okay, so you're writing everything that's on this number 4 here. You don't need to write cell functions, but you do need to write capture and release energy, chloroplasts, and mitochondria. All right, so chloroplasts are found in plant cells, and chloroplasts are what give plant cells their green color, because they have, they have chlorophyll in it, which is a pigment. Pigment is the word I was looking for. So chloroplasts have chlorophyll, which is a pigment that is a big part of photosynthesis, okay? And you should have photosynthesis written down in your notes, but it's been a while. So I would like you guys to write down chloroplasts give plants their green color. You could just say chloroplasts make plants green and needed for photosynthesis. Okay, so chloroplasts make plants green, needed for photosynthesis is what you're writing down. And then I do want you to write down this photosynthesis equation. You don't have to draw the pictures and all that kind of stuff, but I do want you to write CO2 plus H2O, and then the arrow, and then C6H12O6, which is glucose, plus O2, which is oxygen that's released. Okay, so that's what we're looking at in photosynthesis. We're going to get into a little more detail in photosynthesis in about a week and a half, but you do need to have this equation written down here and know that this happens in the chloroplasts. So photosynthesis happens in the chloroplasts. If you don't have it written down already, you're writing down chloroplasts make plants green and needed for photosynthesis, right? Because photosynthesis happens inside the chloroplast, and that's how we get glucose. So you can see here, this is a picture of the LODSL, which you've either just finished looking at or you're about to look at when you get your turn on the microscope. And this is what it looks like inside the cell, which is pretty cool. And then this in the bottom right corner is a picture of what an artist drew it to look like. So you've got your chloroplast membrane, and then inside there's these little stacked up thylakoids, and that's where photosynthesis happens. It's very complicated. We'll get into some detail about it later on, but if you take a biology class in college, that's when you'll get into major detail about it. So you don't have to worry too much about how complicated it is. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the mitochondria. So I want you to write down mitochondria. So mitochondria is if there's more than one. Mitochondrion is for one. In Greek, Mitochondrion is singular, so it's just one, and then mitochondria is plural for a masculine word. So that's why we have it that way. So mitochondria converts the chemical energy stored in glucose into ATP. And ATP is a molecule that provides energy for the cell to do work. So what I want you to write down is mitochondria converts chemical energy in glucose into ATP. Converts chemical energy in glucose into ATP. And then you're going to write down this chemical reaction for cellular respiration, okay? So you're going to write cellular respiration, and then you're going to write glucose, which is C6H12O6, plus oxygen, which is O2. And you're going to put your little arrow to show a chemical reaction is happening. And then you're going to write CO2, carbon dioxide, plus water, H2O, plus ATP. And ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate. You don't have to write it all down. You just need to know ATP is our energy molecule. So you're writing cellular respiration, and then you're writing down this equation here, and you have to include ATP at the end, okay? This is going to be very important. You're going to have questions about this on your quiz and on your unit test, which is your final unit test, right? So mitochondria converts chemical energy in glucose into ATP, and cellular respiration, which happens in the mitochondria, is this process down here. And that's why we breathe out carbon dioxide, right? We have mitochondria in each of our cells, and they're constantly making ATP so that we can move and think and do everything that our body needs. We need energy for all of it. And so we have cellular respiration happening in our cells, and then the byproduct is carbon dioxide. So we breathe out carbon dioxide. And we need oxygen. See, part of the beginning of cellular respiration is the glucose and the oxygen. That's why we need to breathe in oxygen. And if you're paying attention to it, it's almost the opposite reaction of photosynthesis. So they kind of are opposites of each other. But make sure you've got this written down, and then move on. And you should have in your notes already that ATP is the energy molecule. You could call it an energy bank. It's like storing energy. But ATP is what our cells use as an active way of using energy. So we have to get the energy from glucose and turn it into ATP for us to be able to use it. And this is what a mitochondria looks like in a drawing. On the right is what a drawing looks like. And then on the left is a very old light microscope image of it that's not stained. And if you look at this in the whole cell, right, before we looked at the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum and the ribosomes, these blue guys with the squigglies are mitochondria. So anytime you see a picture where it's kind of like an oblong shape and then there's this squiggly bit, that's going to be the mitochondria. All right, so if you didn't already have these equations written down, you need to have them written down. The photosynthesis equation is carbon dioxide plus water leads to glucose and oxygen, and then cellular respiration is glucose plus oxygen turns into carbon dioxide and water and ATP. So if you didn't get those written down before, if you didn't pause, you need to write these down now, okay? Fun fact, chloroplasts and mitochondria contain small DNA molecules that are slightly different than the DNA in the nucleus. And in humans, mitochondria and all other organelles are inherited from the egg, from the mother, right? So you can actually track back your maternal line, all the females, with the mitochondrial DNA. It's really cool. If you're interested in that or you're curious about that, ask me. I can explain a little more, but that's a fun fact. So those are our notes for today. And then make sure you have these written down. I will be checking these notes when we do our note check before your quiz. All right, so thanks for doing notes pre-recorded. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and were able to follow along and pause as you needed.